political necessity. As Nigeria marks the remarkable year of 56 as an independent nation, its story has been one of a prospect for political economic transformation that needs to address certain critical issues. First is the Nigerian economy, which remains a sore point. Ever since the discovery of oil in the 50s, it has refused to diversify its revenue, even when a 2014 GDP rebasing report showed that it has already been diversified by sector basis. An unfortunate situation is that with the decline in the crude oil price since 2014, which has adversely affected its revenue base, and 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth in the early part of 2016, leaving it in a recession, Nigeria is now facing the task of taking vital decisions.
Well, I think the direction is almost being forced upon us, which is to say, how can we be a lot more inward-looking in terms of being run a self-sustaining economy. The primary thing is to have an economy in which we can feed ourselves, and that puts agriculture into the limelight. We must be able to feed our people. We must be able to feed the nation. We must be able to perform all those things from, like I say, from farm to fork. And these things in themselves actually create a huge direction. For this country, the value proposition that we've got to put to the world is to say that we have a country that is blessed with all kinds of natural resources, and we must aim to see how we can add value to our natural resources in such a way that we can be self-sustaining, that we can generate tremendous foreign exchange revenue, not just from one commodity, but a whole variety of activities that we're involved in this country, to try and create an environment in which we say that, look, the government's role is to make the private sector successful. That has got to be the government's mission. They've got to try and see how they can make the private sector successful, to the extent that the success of government must equate directly to the success of the private sector. We shouldn't be able to separate the two. Government has got to get itself to a stage whereby its revenues are being driven by what it receives from the private sector in terms of tax. Government has got to ensure that it does not grow over and above the economy it manages. At the moment, we have a huge government managing an economy that is extremely small in relative terms. There's got to be a balance between those two. So it is so clear what we need to do. If we don't make those policies, I think those policies are apparent to us based on what it is we're facing today. Our ability to now focus and do those things is where we're asking leadership to say, let's go forward. The role of government, help the private sector to succeed.
The 36 states of the Federation are now facing that challenge of effective public finance management, navigating through the recession, which calls for proactive steps.
Just like the country is facing huge challenges, particularly in the economic arena, the states are facing similar challenges. And I think for state governors, we need to focus on cutting costs, reviewing the machinery of government and the size so that we can live within our means. We also need to look at our economies, state economies, and diversify away from reliance on monthly allocations from the Federation account. That means developing agriculture, developing mining and services, and widening our tax base so that we collect more resources from taxes than what we get monthly from Abuja. Finally, I think states must invest aggressively in education and healthcare because we have a growing population. Nigeria is forecasted to be the third most populous country in the world by the year 2050. Our population would be around 450 million. That is not a bad thing if that population is educated, healthy and productive. And the challenge, I think, is for the state governments that are directly responsible for social services to budget a large percentage of their annual spending on education and healthcare. That's what we are trying to do in Kaduna State. Times are hard. As I said before, and many criticize me, the worst job in Nigeria today is to be a state governor. But somebody has to do the job, and we are doing the best we can to support the efforts of the federal government to change the direction of the Nigerian economy.
It also calls for a robust political system that will move the nation forward.
We're an emerging democracy. Like any emerging system, you're going to have the challenges, you're going to have the disappointments. But out of it, hopefully resilience and growth would occur. I think there'll be a realignment of forces, which is natural, because we're still going to find our equilibrium. Don't forget that we're not a democracy based on ideology, right? The political parties are at best political platforms. So you'll have a realignment of forces until gradually you'll have birds of a feather coming together, right? And that's when it begins to mature. But right now it's infancy. You know, when you're in kindergarten school, children of all shapes and they just play together. Girls and boys play, no discrimination. But as they get to mature and know themselves, the girls play separately from the boys. Then even among the subset of the boys, they also start to distinguish themselves. You know, boys of a certain ilk gather together and all that. So that's going to gradually deepen our democracy. And I hope it will be sooner than later. But certainly there'll be a realignment of forces. One thing is certain, we can do better than we're doing.
Indeed, these are challenging times for the Nigerian workforce, who expect the government to be more responsible, accountable, and transparent.
Nigeria 56, I mean, it's good that we've gotten independence. Nigeria survived up to this level. If you know that some other countries that got independence, some of them have collapsed, it's commendable that we are on our feet as a nation. But there's more to be done. We have to ask ourselves, the promise of independence is that we must have a national economy that is under the control of Nigerians. Are we having that today? I think there's a slide to dependency. You know, what I mean here is that we depend on loans now from abroad, we depend on imported food. I think the promise of independence is not just political, it's also economic. So we need to now, the next, 50 years or so, Nigeria should remain a self-reliant, truly economically independent country.
Nigeria is still a kind of an evolving democracy. At 56, relative to other developed countries, we say we're still at our embryonic stage. However, having a political independence without economic independence is still staying in slavery. So, if you can look at what our per capita income is today relative to what the South Africans have, you will say that the South Africans that were just recently made independent are by far better than us. So what we are saying in essence is that, are we saying the independence we have gotten since 1960 has become a curse rather than a blessing for us? These are times for us to reflect. Some people now have gone beyond thinking outside the box to thinking without the box. But we in Nigeria, we're still thinking inside the box. So when do we think outside? Not to talk of thinking without the box. This is the kind of challenge we are having now. So our leaders should stop talking about democracy. Democracy, as far as we are concerned, is yet to have its proper footing in this country. In the sense that it is not yet the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Yes, it is the government of the people, by the people, but for a few elites. So we don't want them to arrogate such positions to them. Transfer the authority of governance to the common people. Listen to them. What impact have you made on the proletarians, our farmers, our peasants, our youth, our unemployed, our women, young and aged? So these are the kind of things, policies that we expect our leaders will kind of bring forward for the benefit of our nation. What we want this administration or this political dispensation should cater for is everybody is equal before the law. And not until we do that, we are still not going to come out of the woods as it is.
Despite all of this, Nigeria is a nation of enterprising people. But this means that the environment must be conducive for doing business.
The fact is, yes, Nigeria will be 56, the country does not have enough capital for all of its needs. So you definitely need foreign capital. And so key is attracting that foreign capital. Foreign capital has choices in terms of where they can invest. Nigeria is not the only country in Africa that's looking for capital, not the only country in the world that's looking for capital. So there are things you have to do to stand out amongst the pack in terms of being able to attract that foreign capital. One, you have to be very conducive as an investment place, meaning the idea of people landing at an airport and being able to go through customs and migration with ease, being able to hail a taxi and get straight to their hotel, just like any other normal country. Those are basic things. Even before that, just the idea of being able to get a visa on arrival, those are key initial steps that gets investors coming, right? Because the more they come, I think the more investors will find that Nigerians are very hospitable people, they're very smart people, very entrepreneurial, as we all know. And so they can find different investment opportunities here that will generate very attractive returns. But we have to make it conducive for them. Little infrastructure needs. The road from the airport to the city has to be fixed so that, when people come in, they have this great impression like, all right, my initial experience is a great one. Now let me start putting some money to work.
With the challenge of managing its diversity from the north, east to the Niger Delta region, where we see different agitations, conflict resolution is a must for the country to experience sustainability.
Considering the differences, the immense diversity in Nigeria, what are you, 200 languages here? Something like that. People with a whole different attitude to life, different customs, different... and the areas around places like Kaduna and so on, where there's real competition for land and resources. I think it's amazing that there aren't more clashes, that there aren't more small wars and problems. I mean, given, as I say, the competition within one country for these areas, these resources, and I'm always very impressed at the way African wars, conflicts end. I mean, they always end in peace talks, and then when it's a done deal, it usually sticks. So the ability to forgive or to come to a common understanding, I think, is much stronger in Africa certainly than Europe. I mean, we are still under the surface. If you considered Europe one country like Nigeria, the tribalism of Europe is deep and bitter and has led to, well, 2 world wars that killed billions of people. So I don't think there's any great lessons to learn from Europe in that way. And as I say, I've always found in Africa, I've watched several conflicts end, and I think Africans are very good at compromising and negotiating and then agreeing a peace deal, and you look at the number of conflicts in Africa that have ended, and I think that's impressive.
In all, the journey of the nation has not been an easy one, but one thing is clear and not in doubt, that Nigeria is a blessed nation with abundant human and natural resources. There is hope for the nation, but that is entrenched in the achievement of a political consensus, coherence of economic policies, which must be focused on improving the welfare of the Nigerian citizen.